Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from Al-Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. Life after Assad, thousands of prisoners are freed from Syrian jails as the Military Operations Administration forces overthrow the government who've held power for 54 years. Meanwhile, Russia gives political asylum to Assad as the HTS flag flies high above the Syrian embassy in Moscow. And American music mogul Jay-Z denies accusations he drugged and raped a 13-year-old girl as he's named alongside Sean Diddy Combs in a US lawsuit. To our top story, and thousands of prisoners, including women and children, have been freed from Syrian jails after the downfall of President Assad's government. Prisons like Sinai in Damascus are thought to contain hidden underground cells. Meanwhile, many Syrians have celebrated the change in power, but wait to discover how a change of leadership will affect their lives. Our correspondent, Trent Murray, has travelled to the Syrian border and he sent us this report.
Well, millions across Syria are still coming to terms with their new reality, that the Assad family regime, which has ruled Syria with an iron fist for the best part of 50 years, has now fallen. Historical scenes in the Middle East, some analysts describing it as almost a Berlin Wall type moment for this region as people came out onto the streets and continue to celebrate the fall of Assad. But of course there is now still uncertainty and questions around what these new HTS rebels will look to do as they seize the levers of power in Damascus. Until now, they are publicly showing that they are reaching out their hands to other minority groups and want to build an inclusive government. But time really will tell. Of course, for Syria's neighbours, they are watching this very, very closely, including Israel. We have seen Israeli tanks and troops moving in to that demilitarised zone behind me here. They have seized that DMZ, the first time they've had a permanent presence there since 1974 when it was created following the Yom Kippur War. Until now, they are saying that it is a temporary measure, but some other countries in this region, including Egypt, have expressed concern that it could be a permanent positioning of Israeli forces to try and seize yet more control of the Golan Heights. We also know the IDF making a number of airstrikes inside of Syria, targeting weapons depots and chemical weapon storage areas that had been abandoned by Assad's troops. The Israelis are saying they are doing that because they want to make sure that those weapons don't fall into the hands of extremists.
Trent Murray on the Syrian border, thank you. Let's get more on those Syrian prisoners now with a volunteer for the humanitarian group, the White Helmets, Ismail Al-Abdullah. Ismail, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Your teams have been dispatched to help locate cells and prisoners. Why has it actually been so difficult to find them?
First of all, Yesterday we received calls about prisoners are now under the ground because many floors under the ground. This is all the prisons Syria as now after freeing Syria, now we have reports from everyone that there is a secret prison there and there and there. Why are you focusing on Sadnaya? We focus on Sadnaya because of its bad reputation and the horrific and horrible stories and horrible narratives we heard over the past years. On the other side, as White Helmet, we offered a reward for anyone who can guide us to those secret prisons in all Syria. In Sadnaya, yesterday we received the call and responded to the calls of that they are imprisoned under the ground. 5 teams, we dispatched 5 teams with its equipment to there. Until now, they after digging and cracking the walls and listening to the sound, we still they don't have any proof. We don't have any proof of any prisoners is now under the floors, under the ground in the down floors.
So it's really a race against time at the moment to free these prisoners. Can you just give us the scale of the operation that's unfolding for you and what lies ahead?
It's very challenging because the building is very big. Many, as you know, and as the world see how the Sunday is big, and if there are hidden cells, it's difficult to find. And what is waiting for us now, just we'll keep searching, we'll keep digging, we'll keep cracking the walls until reach the final point, and we will report that to all the world what is reality about the Sadnaya prison.
So we are seeing footage now of women and children being released across social media platforms. Why were these people in Sadnaya prison, and what sort of conditions were they living under?
Most all the families of Syria, they have relative or a friend or son or daughter who were kept for years and years and years in Sadnaya. Sadnaya, which is the horrible prison. We have heard and listened to the stories and narrative from those who were kept there. No one can imagine the pain. No one can imagine how they were treated. No food, no bathrooms, nothing. Most of the time naked. They cannot raise their head. They just need to keep their heads down. And more than 20 people in one cell, 1 meter or 2 meters square. So difficult, and this is the end of this story of Sadnaya prison. And as white helmets, we hope that this is the end of all prisons in Syria, and we're working on this. We respond to any call that we receive about any secret prison in Syria.
Ismail, just one question, our final question. Is there any indication that there will be any repercussions for the Assad government for the treatment of what you've just been explaining to us of these people in these prisons?
As we worked before over the past decade, we gathered evidences that Assad's regime killed Syrian people by barrel bombs and chemical weapons and all the violations that were committed in Syria. The same thing will keep pursuing the justice for the victims. We will provide with evidence that enable us to hold all the perpetrators and Assad himself accountable for his crimes, how the atrocities and massacres and using the prohibited weapons on civilians over the past years.
Ismail Al-Abdullah for the White Helmets, thank you very much for talking to us this evening. Now, sticking with that story, and the Kremlin has officially granted political asylum to the former Syrian president after he fled Damascus from the Military Operations Administration forces at the weekend. A Kremlin spokesperson told reporters there was no plan for Putin to meet with Assad, but an HTS flag is now flying at the country's embassy in Moscow. Let's get the latest from Moscow with our correspondent, Dasha Chernyshova. Dasha, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Now, this is a huge blow to Russia. They have been allies for decades. Was Moscow really surprised by this rapid fall of the Assad government?
Well, indeed, according to the statements released by the Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, the whole world was surprised by how rapidly the militant opposition have managed to take control over Damascus, and Moscow is no exception. This has been surprised. Moscow has been surprised, and Moscow is also saying that it is going to carefully analyze the situation as things stand now. But as you have rightly pointed out, the new flag has been installed on the Syrian embassy in the Russian capital. So that is a sign that Moscow is actually willing to cooperate with all the authorities in Syria. Even though Moscow used to support the government of Bashar al-Assad, we understand Moscow wants to make sure that it has the communication channels open when it comes to the cooperation with the opposition in Syria. Also, an interesting observation here that has been made by many of those who have been following the developments. Russia has been calling HTS as terrorists, saying they are listed as such by the United Nations, by the United States. Now, in all the state media, you can certainly see that what has been happening in Syria is that the military opposition have taken control of the country. So it does appear that Moscow is willing to make sure they maintain the communication channels. At the same time, Moscow is calling for the political process to start under the auspices of the United Nations, for the interstate dialogue as well as the dialogue inside Syria among the different opposition groups.
Russia has 2 strategic military bases in Syria, giving access to the region. I was just wondering, where does this leave President Putin's presence in the Middle East? And could this be a reason why he's keeping those lines of communication open?
Absolutely, it is and has been the key actually reason for that. We understand that to this moment the situation is very volatile and Kremlin understands that very clearly. Therefore, Peskov has said on Monday that it is premature to talk about the maintaining of Russia's military presence in this country, but certainly it's going to be the subject of communication and discussions with the new authorities. To remind you, Russia has the airfield in Khmeimim as well as the naval base in Tartus on the Mediterranean. And certainly these are the facilities that Moscow would like to maintain in this region. But we have been hearing different opinions from different layers of the Russian establishment, some saying that actually there has been security guarantees promised to the Russian side from the military opposition with regards to the security of those facilities as well as the Russian diplomatic mission in Syria. But also others saying that it is the very fact that there are bases and there are the Russian military that is providing for the security of those facilities. But it is one way or another a very important question for Russia that is yet to be precise, especially given the volatility of the situation in Syria at this stage.
Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow, thank you very much for bringing us the latest on that story. To the US now, and President-elect Donald Trump has blamed the ousting of Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad on Russia's abandonment of its ally in favour for pursuing its invasion of Ukraine. He has also said he would be happy to keep the US in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, but only if other members of the military alliance are paying their way. Kate Fisher has this report from Washington.
Syrians are living their first full day free of the brutal Assad regime in more than 50 years.
Today, we don't give our joy to anyone. We've been waiting for this day for 50 years.
The family of Austin Tice has been waiting for more than 12 years. That's when the American journalist was captured in Syria. The White House says that getting him home is a top priority.
We believe he's alive. We think we can get him back, but we have no direct evidence of that yet. And Assad should be held accountable.
Biden hailed the fall of Assad as historic. The speed of events in Syria leaving even the usually brash US President-elect Donald Trump seemingly a little disconcerted as he met French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris.
It certainly seems like the world is going a little crazy right now. Yeah. And we'll be talking about that.
On social media, Trump said that Russia's abandonment of Assad led to his downfall and that the Kremlin lost interest in Syria because of its war in Ukraine, pushing Russian President Vladimir Putin to cut his losses and end the conflict. Trump also gave his first US network news interview since being re-elected. Speaking on NBC News' Meet the Press with Kristen Welker, he wouldn't commit to keeping the US in NATO unless other member countries of the Western military alliance spend more on defence.
Again, they have to pay their bills. If they pay their bills, absolutely.
But not if they don't pay their bills.
But NATO's taken advantage of us.
Trump has long vowed to disengage the US from global conflicts, but events in Syria mean that promise will be immediately tested. He'll have to consider whether to withdraw US troops from the country and, if he doesn't, whether he's happy to let US adversaries fill the vacuum. Kate Fisher, Al-Arabiya News, Washington.
Let's have a look at some of the other stories making headlines today. Donald Trump has told reporters he will look at pardoning those involved in the 2021 US Capitol riots on his first day back in the Oval Office next month. The president-elect also promised the end of automatic citizenship for anyone who was born in the country. Now, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman welcomed UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer in Riyadh, where both leaders pledged to strengthen bilateral ties. High on the agenda were enhancing defence and economic cooperation and exploring opportunities for increased industrial collaboration. This visit marks a key stop in Starmer's first official tour of the Gulf since becoming UK Prime Minister. During his trip, he emphasised that the stability of the Middle East is crucial for establishing a secure foundation at home. 2 people are dead and 3 are still missing after an explosion at a fuel depot near Florence in Italy. 9 people were also injured in the blast, with an emergency alert sent to everyone living within 5 kilometres of the site. South Korean leader Yoon Suk-yeol has been banned from leaving the country after declaring martial law last week. Yoon has apologised for his decision and could still face a criminal investigation. According to the country's defence ministry, the president is still legally commander-in-chief, despite calls for him to stand down. Police in New York are questioning a person of interest in the hunt for the gunman responsible for the killing of top health insurance executive Brian Thompson outside a Manhattan hotel 5 days ago. Divers have been searching Central Park's underwater areas for any evidence, and forces have also been on a manhunt in Georgia. So far, neither the suspect nor the weapon have been found. The American music mogul Jay-Z has been named in a US lawsuit that alleges he, alongside Sean Diddy Combs, drugged and raped a 13-year-old girl in New York in 2000. Jay-Z, real name Sean Carter, has denied the allegation and dismissed the legal action from the anonymous accuser as a blackmail attempt. Sean Combs, who also denies the claims against him, currently awaits trial after being charged with sex trafficking and racketeering. Let's get more on those details of this case with our correspondent Sally Patterson, who joins us now from New York. Sally, thank you so much for joining us. Jay-Z vehemently denies these allegations, but can you give us some detail about what they do entail?
Very serious allegations indeed coming out. This is the first high-profile defendant to be named alongside Sean Diddy Combs, who has been in the spotlight several times in recent months with several allegations of his own. But this, for the first time, is also bringing another A-list celebrity with him, and that is Jay-Z. Now, the rapper is accused of being involved in these allegations way back in 2000. The alleger in this case, the accuser, is not named in the documents filed on Sunday, but they are referred to as Jane Doe. She claims to have been 13 at the time, and she says she tried to go to some music video awards, and she says that when she couldn't get in because she was only 13 and not on the list and didn't have a ticket, she started speaking to a limousine driver who says that he could take her to an after party. She says she went along to that party and was given a drink, after which she says she felt woozy and needed to rest. She claims she went into a bedroom inside this party, and it was there that she says that Combs and Carter came in and raped her one after another. They said she claims that another celebrity, a female celebrity, was also in the room and stood by and watched. Now, of course, both of these men, as we've said, strongly deny the allegations. They say that this is really a pursuit of money from celebrities and claim that they had nothing to do with this.
Just tell us a little bit about Jay-Z and Sean Combs' relationship. How do they know one another? What's the connection there?
Well, these men were really coming into the same circles at the same time back in the 90s. They had a friendly rivalry at the beginning of their music careers and have actually collaborated several times since then on various projects. Those include both musically, but also they made a joint donation, for example, in the wake of Hurricane Katrina here in the US, both handing over a giant check together. They were also seen out in public several times over the years, especially after the relationship began with Beyonce as well. The three of them would often find themselves out at parties and in similar circles as well. And so they've been in the spotlight several times in recent years. And we also heard from Diddy himself years ago saying how much he appreciates that relationship that he has with Jay-Z.
So you mentioned Beyonce there. Jay-Z is, of course, famously married to her. Have we heard anything from her so far on this matter at all?
Well, she is indirectly linked to this, of course, being married to Jay-Z and having collaborated herself with Sean Combs musically as well. Now, we haven't heard anything from her specifically, but in a statement put out by Jay-Z, he talks about the impact that these allegations will have on his family. Just to read you a short amount of that, he says, "My only heartbreak is for my family. My wife and I will have to sit our children down, one of whom is at the age where her friends will surely see the press and ask questions about the nature of these claims and explain the cruelty and greed," he says, of people. He says, "I mourn yet another loss of innocence." They, of course, have 3 children together who will indirectly be affected by these very serious allegations as well.
Thank you so much for that, Sally Patterson in New York. We appreciate that. Let's have a look at the top business news. Volkswagen workers across Germany are back on strike today as a 4th round of negotiations between unions and managers takes place. The car maker's decision to cut wages and close factories in order to slash costs and keep up with Asian competitors has resulted in a bitter standoff with workers. Britain's Chancellor has told finance leaders in Brussels that having a reset in relations will boost economic growth between the UK and Europe. Rachel Reeves said the UK government wanted to break down barriers to trade and help businesses sell in each other's markets. It's the first time a British Chancellor has given an address of this kind since the United Kingdom voted to leave the European Union. To sport now, and British race driver Lando Norris secured McLaren's first Formula One championship for 26 years at the weekend, winning the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. It was his 4th win of the season, giving him enough points to take the trophy. To cricket now, and South Africa are one step closer to the World Test Championship final after a 109-run win over Sri Lanka in Khabera. The squad could compete at Lord's in June if they win both tests against Pakistan on the 26th of December. And football stadiums all over Saudi Arabia are upping their chances to host the FIFA World Cup in 2034 with several new sites. The Saudi bid to host the tournament received the highest technical score according to FIFA with 419.8 out of 500. FIFA will make an official announcement later this week. And finally, Hong Kong has long been a must-see spot for food lovers. But for Muslim travellers and residents, finding a restaurant to eat can be a challenge. Now, the city is trying to change that, with its leader announcing measures to increase the number of Halal-certified restaurants to draw travellers from the Middle East and Southeast Asia as the city looks to diversify and revive its stagnant economy. Laura Westbrook has this report.
This is one of the few Chinese restaurants in Hong Kong that Anwar Rashid and his family can eat at. The visitors from Singapore travelled 30 minutes by bus to get to this halal-certified eatery, which means food must be prepared separately from forbidden items such as pork under Islamic rules.
Of course, a lot of more of halal food will be nicer, and of course, like a variety of it. Like you do have kebab joints, which is halal here over here. But that's why we travel, right? You want to eat that country's food.
Islam food was started by Ma Tong Wai Man's father-in-law, who fled mainland China during the Second World War.
So we got Xiqing, Shanghai, Peking, and Guangzhou style, cooking style.
Hong Kong is home to 300,000 Muslims, but only around 106 out of some 13,000 licensed dining spots in Hong Kong are halal certified.
The government is on a big push to get this number up as Hong Kong looks to tap into the potential of Muslim travelers and investors from Southeast Asia and the Middle East amid geopolitical tensions with Europe and the United States.
The restaurant orders its meat from Australia and New Zealand, which can be more pricey, while sourcing suppliers can also be a challenge. Mrs. Ma says education will also go a long way in making the city more Muslim-friendly.
Hong Kong people, you have to get used to it first, right? Because, many Hong Kong people will eat pork or they don't know anything about Muslim. They just don't know that they won't eat pork. That's it. Or they will have hijab like this.
The city's chief imam, Mufti Muhammad Arshad, says making Hong Kong more attractive to Muslims goes beyond food.
For last few months, I have seen the changes at airport. They have provided the prayer space to different parts of airport, as well as the halal restaurant and many five-star hotels. They are also converting their hotel to halal-friendly environment, like providing the copies of the Holy Book Quran.
With the city facing tough economic challenges, he says getting more restaurants halal certified will bring in more customers. But with just over 1% of Muslim visitors arriving from Southeast Asian countries and the Middle East last year, there is still a way to go. Laura Westbrook for Al-Arabiya News, Hong Kong.
A reminder of our top stories. Life after Assad. Thousands of prisoners are freed from Syrian jails as the Military Operations Administration forces overthrow the government who've held power for 54 years. Syria's Prime Minister has told Al Arabiya he has now agreed to hand over power. Meanwhile, Russia gives political asylum to Assad as the new Syrian flag flies high above the Syrian embassy in Moscow. An American music mogul, Jay-Z, denies accusations he drugged and raped a 13-year-old girl as he's named alongside Sean Diddy Combs in a US lawsuit. And that's all from us on W News. Thank you for joining us. Riz Khan is coming up next. And don't miss Tom Burges Watson with GNT. Good night.
At Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Al-Arabiya News.
It's very impressive.
Where knowledge meets perspective.
Hello and welcome. I'm Riz Khan. 1 million dead or wounded. That's the figure reported by the Wall Street Journal as an estimate of the total number of casualties suffered by both sides on the battlefield during 1,000 days of war between Russia and Ukraine. Well, amid changes in the leadership of both the US government and the NATO military alliance, the milestone was reached at a time of uncertainty. In the days which followed, a spiral of escalatory claims and counterclaims fueled the fears of a global nuclear conflict. Russia has threatened to use its new hypersonic missiles against Ukrainian decision-making centers. A newly unleashed Ukraine continues to make use of American and European long-range missiles inside Russia. Both sides are now maneuvering for position ahead of January the 20th, when a new president, armed with his peace plan, enters the White House. And Donald Trump's appointment of his special envoy for Ukraine and Russia completes the team sheet of names that he wants to help him end the conflict. In this episode, I'll speak with influential voices from both Russia and Ukraine. But my first guest looks after military matters in the Baltic state of Latvia. Andris Spruds is the defense minister of a nation that's a NATO member, whose government is a prominent voice in support of Ukraine and shares a border with Russia. And he's spoken in support of extending conscription for women in the years ahead. Minister, it's good to have you on the show. Let me start by asking, what is Latvia's response to the fast-moving developments in the Russia-Ukraine conflict?
Yes, thank you for having me. What we see, of course, it is a continuous brutality of Russian forces. What we see also, of course, intimidation by Russian forces and by Russian posture. So, of course, it once more underlines the importance of NATO, the Western community, global community supporting Ukraine. Because if we don't support Ukraine right now, the costs will be higher in the future.
Do you think the cycle of escalation has moved the world any closer to nuclear war than at any point in recent time?
We see escalation. We see additional blackmailing. We see additional nuclear rhetoric as well, I would say, unfortunately. Of course, it also demonstrates the fragility and challenges of the global security order. And also we see that there are authoritarian revisionist countries which are exactly using that kind of rhetoric. At the same time, I would not overestimate the scenario when nuclear Armageddon can take place. I still believe that there is some common sense. There is very clear signals also from NATO side. NATO is a nuclear alliance. Consequences would be extremely high, and I would say, first of all, extremely high for those countries and those authoritarian leaders which are using that kind of blackmailing.
The Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has said there's a real risk of global conflict, especially now that Iran and North Korea are more involved. Do you share this assessment, and what concern is there that Latvia could become a frontline, considering it shares a 300-kilometer border with Russia?
We see turmoil in the global security order. Of course, it concerns us. I think it concerns everyone who is interested in stability, who is interested in rules-based international order, in sovereignty of nations. So that's why, of course, there are a lot of concerns, what we see around the globe. And in those kind of circumstances, certainly some of the countries appear are willing somehow to become revisionist countries. And again, this is very unfortunate for all of us, and especially also for those revisionist countries themselves. As for Latvia, we are part of the most successful defensive alliance. It is not about security of Latvia, because we must remember Latvia is part of NATO, which means that security of Latvia is also security of NATO. There is one NATO. And in this regard, of course, we are all doing the necessary homework nationally, but of course also together with our international partners, our international allies within NATO alliance, which is defensive alliance, which is ready to defend, which is ready to deter, which is ready, of course, to support also the countries which fight for its freedom and rules-based international order.
Germany has drawn up a list of bunkers to protect its citizens in the case of any attack. Apart from NATO membership, as you were discussing, what steps has Latvia taken to help protect its citizens?
Well, we are ready for different kind of hybrid activities. We already see the hybrid warfare for some time, so this is nothing new for us. The weaponization of illegal migration, cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, incidents against critical infrastructure. But that's why, of course, we as society must be ready for different kind of scenarios. And I absolutely can underline, we are ready. We are ready in society, on societal level, we are ready among institutions. And of course, we cooperate closely with our allies, with also institutions from our partner countries. Of course, this is a important work which should be done nationally, but also in a joint effort to preclude from any kind of negative scenarios, any kind of sabotage and hybrid warfare activities from our adversaries.
Why did Latvia reintroduce military service for men last year, and what's been the response to your suggestion that women also might be conscripted at some point soon?
Yes, we reintroduced conscription. It was supported widely by society. We realize that if we discuss, and not only discuss, but if we implement comprehensive defense approach, everybody is involved in comprehensive defense approach. And this is also a position of our neighboring countries. We see conscription all around the region. And this actually also refers to the question of women. Women are part of course, part of the comprehensive defense. Every individual, every human being also in Latvia, of course, contributes to our defensive abilities. And we see example here in Sweden, Norway, Denmark recently also introduced compulsory service for women. So here, absolutely, we underline importance of comprehensive defense. I would say the Baltic Nordic regional model, and also the, of course, equality of rights and responsibilities for all genders.
There is a fear among some in the Baltic states and other former Soviet nations that Russia is trying to create a split within each country between those citizens of Russian origin and the rest of the population, and even among politicians who are pro-Russian or anti-Russian. What chance is there Russia could create that kind of division in your country?
Well, of course, Russia can attempt and try different kind of means and measures to split and to divide. And I think this has been part of the Russian hybrid activities, again, for years. Of course, we are a democratic country, which means that there is diversity of opinions, diversity of political parties as well. And we are proud of it, that we have this diversity. At the same time, on the fundamental issues, sovereignty, freedom, democracy, supporting Ukraine, there is no split in Latvian society. Yes, there is some legacy of the Soviet Empire. Unfortunately, there are some minority groups within society which sometimes seems to be still living in the past. It could be acknowledged, but absolute wide majority among Latvia's population, including Russian-speaking population, are loyal, patriotic, supportive of NATO, supportive of course, of being a member of European Union, also supporting Ukraine.
European officials are investigating what they believe is sabotage of underwater cables in the Baltic Sea, including a connection between Lithuania and Sweden and Finland and Germany. What information are you getting about this issue and what's being described as a hybrid warfare being waged by Russia against the West? What can you do to avoid something similar affecting Latvia?
There is hybrid warfare in the region. Absolutely, this is without any doubt. And Russia wages this hybrid warfare activity. I would be a bit more careful exactly specifically on this incident, because still some investigation must be completed to make specific already the conclusions. But yes, we are partly facing those challenges of defending, protecting our critical infrastructure. It's not easy. Let's be again straightforward, because we see cables hundreds of kilometers, and you cannot keep the warship above every cable, every place. This is, of course, also understandable. But additional monitoring, additional cooperation among institutions, additional flag appearance, also showing the NATO presence in the region. Also, of course, additionally adding warships and patrolling. This, of course, has been done and must be done. And of course, additional monitoring is certainly the key response to this.
I presume that's in response to Britain's warning that Russia is preparing to use cyber attacks on critical infrastructure against European nations supporting Ukraine in this conflict.
You are absolutely right. We've been facing cyber attacks again for years. 3 Baltic countries, if we look at some specific cyber attacks, 30%, almost 1/3 of cyber attacks against European Union, they are targeting exactly 3 Baltic countries. So we already built a strong wall of resilience against cyber attacks, but it is an ongoing process. It is ongoing homework to improve our resilience, to improve our reaction time, to improve our, in a sense, the wall against any such kind of detrimental activities by Russia. And it should be put straightforwardly, by Russia first of all.
Now, Minister, NATO's leading military officer, Admiral Rob Bauer, has warned European businesses that they have a role to play in preparing for a wartime scenario. Is that the case in Latvia too?
Yes, in Latvia, absolutely. We are much more ready, I guess, as some other countries, but I would still say the glass is half full rather than half empty. I think there is this understanding what takes place in Ukraine. It has a real dire and long-term consequences. That it means also adjustment and readjustment how we deal with Russia. So we cannot come back to some kind of business as usual or business as previous. It also means that we need certainly to actively cooperate and enhance our military industry. Also, businesses have critical role to play here, and they are playing this role, including in Latvia. We are very strongly, of course, putting emphasis on our own military industry, which involves the business community. But it's not only about military industry, it's in general. So that, of course, we must reorient any connections with countries which can use economic tool as a political and strategic tool of intimidation and pressure. Of course, this should be taken care of.
Now, Minister, this week there was a fatal plane crash in your neighbour, Lithuania, and there are suspicions of Russian sabotage. What do you know about that?
Well, again, so there are specific investigation procedures. I would not rush with pre-assumptions or speculations on this. But of course, once more, it underlines how important it is to protect all domains of our life, be it in the sea, be it in the air. So it is once more underlining the importance of resilience, importance of readiness, importance of understanding what we are facing, that we should be ready for different scenarios, and also very importantly, that we should strongly communicate with our societies and explain as much as possible to keep the safety and security feeling always present, even though realizing that we live in quite insecure and challenging times.
Minister, I wonder what impact the potential threat from Russia has had on bolstering collaboration between European nations that share a border with Russia, such as yours.
Absolutely. It has bolstered cooperation. We've seen also, of course, and we very much welcome the NATO membership for Sweden and Finland, which means also that the region is much more strongly interconnected in terms of military, in terms of economic, political cooperation, even though it was strong already before. But common adversary or understanding of strategically common threat, it is always unifying countries. For all of us, being, in many ways on the front line with Russia means that we have to strengthen our defense lines. We should cooperate. We should build a shield on a border. We should defend every inch of NATO territory, and every inch of NATO territory starts exactly in our countries. And that's why also mutual cooperation among us is instrumental, very important, and is also developing.
Well, there's an unusual situation in your region, Minister, and that's the issue of the Russian enclave of Kaliningrad, a small territory on the Baltic, cut off from Russia, surrounded by Poland and Lithuania, and requiring access through Lithuania, Latvia or Belarus to reach the Russian border. And there have been tensions since Lithuania announced it would halt the transport of EU-sanctioned goods coming from Russia en route to Kaliningrad. What are the potential consequences of this move?
Well, of course, this should be still discussed. I guess it also once more underlines that Russia has its vulnerabilities. Naturally, Kaliningrad is also it. So Kaliningrad enclave or oblast region, it is a vulnerability also strategically for Russia. And it should be always reminded to Russia as well that also for Russia to somehow to have constructive relationships with its neighbors, it is in their long-term interests. So that's why, of course, it is also the Lithuania's decision. It is also, of course, a common decision within European Union. But I believe that if Lithuania decides that there are security concerns and security risks due to this transit, then I would assume there is an absolute legitimate right to exactly make such kind of relevant decisions.
Now, Ukraine was recently given the green light by the United States, the UK and France to strike military targets further inside Russia. Was this a necessary step in your view?
It was necessary. We welcome that decision. Latvia, of course, also supports Ukraine strongly, once more also because of those reasons that this is about a long-term consequences for the global security, about rules-based international order. And if Ukrainian people are being hit by Russian rockets, by Russian missiles, and Ukraine cannot respond, of course, this is not a right situation. So we absolutely believe that this is the right for Ukraine to defend itself, against Russian aggression, to protect its people, and to destroy legitimate military targets, the basis from which those attacks against Ukrainian civilians are being targeted. So that's why, yes, Latvia supports it and welcomes, and actually invites even to do more and more speedily, with a more sense of urgency. This has been done, but it could have been done, that kind of decision could have been taken even earlier. Latvia itself, of course, supplies also Ukraine with weapons. It supplies also with training. Latvia is also co-leading with UK in a drone coalition, which is, of course, also very important in the new technology war. And we will be continuously supporting Ukraine with 0.25% from our GDP exactly for military expenditures, military support.
Well, now, Russia responded by using its new Oreshnik intermediary-range hypersonic missile, and President Putin said that was a warning to the West. What message did you take from this?
This is a brutal intimidation. It is intimidation by Russia. This is Russian traditional approach. If something is not according to Russia's plans, so it starts to intimidate its neighbors and starts to intimidate, other nations. So, of course, in this situation, this once more just underlines importance of Ukraine being allowed to target legitimate targets in Russia and supporting Ukraine constantly, because, intimidation must not be prevailing in international relations among sovereign nations.
Will these weapons systems have a significant impact on altering the current situation, where Ukraine's been losing territory that it holds in Russia's Kursk region, while Russians have been steadily gaining ground in the east of the country?
Well, every day is decisive in Ukraine's fight for its freedom. And of course, let's not immediately fall into the traps that everything is going bad. Of course, we can realize that there are a lot of challenges and difficulties. There is sort of, if we may say, Russia's advantage to absolute disregard for human life, also disregard for its own soldiers' human life. But at the same time, exactly because of those reasons, because of that intimidation, Ukraine must be given all weapons to protect itself, also hitting legitimate targets on Russian soil.
Just a final thought, Minister. Eyes are turning to the USA, where the incoming Trump administration says it wants some kind of peace deal. And very recently, Michael Waltz, Donald Trump's nominee for National Security Advisor, said the war needs to come to a, quote, responsible end. And the Ukrainian President, Vladimir Zelensky, has also said that he wants a fair deal. What do you think a responsible and fair deal looks like, and what compromises have to be made in order to reach it?
Exactly. All of us would like to see the peace in our region, and of course not people dying because of some imperialistic ambitions. That's why we also welcome that there is, of course, aspiration for a deal. But once more, it is important that the deal has been achieved from positions of strength. So we must jointly speak and act from positions of strength. This is crucial. And as Volodymyr Zelensky, as President of Ukraine, has said, yes, exactly, it must be a fair and just deal, which means that it must be the deal defined above all also by Ukraine. It cannot be a deal which is imposed on Ukraine. So Ukrainian people fight for their freedom. They've been supported, rightly so. They fight in many ways for freedom and values for all of us. And that's why, of course, this fair and just deal is above all defined by Ukrainian side. Liberating territories, the war criminals paying also, let us say, the responsibilities for what has been done. So, of course, this would be a fair deal for Ukrainian people. But above all, it is Ukrainian nation decides what is fair and just deal. So nothing should be made without also consent of Ukrainian.
Well, Minister Andris Spruds, thank you very much for making the time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So how's all this being viewed from Moscow? Let's get a perspective from the Russian Member of Parliament, Evgeny Popov. He also presents the popular primetime current affairs show 60 Minutes that airs on the state-owned Russia One network. Evgeny, good to have you back on the show. Now, following the recent developments in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, both the green light given to Ukraine to strike inside Russia and, of course, the Kremlin's response with the use of new hypersonic missiles, how much closer is the world to nuclear war?
I thank you for giving me a floor, and I don't think we are pretty close to the full-scale nuclear war, because it's many steps away in forward on stair of escalation, and we just going up on the stair step by step to the nuclear war. But I don't think that we have that there are much insane politics in Europe and in the United States, which want to be blown up in a nuclear war. And that's why I think we are closer to the negotiations than to the nuclear war.
I'll touch on that a little bit as the show goes on, but President Putin suggested the use of this new Oreshnik missile was a warning to the West. What do you think will happen if the West doesn't listen to this warning?
It's hard to say for me, because I'm not a guy from military Ministry of Defense, but I think it was an important warning from Russia to any countries who thinks that we're not going to respond to the escalations. It was a signal to the West, to Washington, to London, to Paris, which is already using their missiles against historically Russian territory. It was hard signal. And I think it was it being heard in Western capitals, but I don't think that Ukraine and Washington will stop using the missiles again against our territory. But on every step which Washington or this lame duck administration will do, we have respond. But it's better for us to be on a table, of negotiations rather than using new type of weapon.
Well, with someone of your senior position and contacts, I know you follow things closely and are party to a lot of information. I wonder, from that perspective, do you see such weapons being used to strike US bases in Poland or military targets on the French or British soil for their supplying of Storm Shadow and Scalp missiles if things escalate?
I think it depends of targets inside Russia territory. And I think it depends of, unfortunately, insane administration in Washington, D.C. right now. Of course, we can attack in response some Western military bases. But it would be historical decision, I would say, because right now we are already at war with NATO countries, with some part of NATO. We are at war with France, we are at war with Great Britain, and we are at war with the United States. Because they are using their missiles, long-range missiles, against our constitutional and historic territory. But I can't say you, would we use our long-range missiles against the Western military bases? If we will have no choice, of course we will do it. But I don't think what will be this step different with full-scale nuclear conflict, because it would be World War III, and World War III would be will be, of course, nuclear war, and no one will left on this planet, maybe. I don't know.
Evgeny, on your popular TV show, you've indicated a doomsday scenario to show how Russian nuclear weapons would be able to obliterate European cities and civilization with just a few missiles. And of course, Russian cities are also vulnerable to the same fate from Western nuclear weapons. Do people in Russia share Western fears of a nuclear escalation, or do they find reassurance in the nuclear deterrent?
You know, Russian people has just one goal: security guarantees, and we will get it on the battlefield or during negotiations. But right now, it's a dangerous phase of the conflict, because just a few red lines ahead, which is the West didn't cancel or didn't destroy. Of course, every people on this planet scared or afraid of nuclear war, because I'm sure that it will be no winner in any kind of nuclear conflict. That's why there aren't insane politicians in Russia which is wanted to use some nuclear missile against Western countries. But right now, we don't have a choice than respond mirror, like a mirror. If you use long-range missile against our territory, what should we do? It's a difficult question, and I don't know exact answer on it. But if the United States using a long-range missile, American long-range missile against our territory, should we use Russians long-range missiles against U.S. territory? If you thinking by logic, yes, we can use it, but I don't think it will happen in nearest future.
Well, you know, Evgeny, President Putin has threatened to use nuclear weapons on multiple occasions, but throughout the conflict. But some have dismissed these as empty threats and empty remarks because it would increase the risk of Armageddon for both sides. And why would any world leader choose to inflict that on his own people?
You know, Riz, I would ask you, don't live in a world of myths. President Putin never threatened to anybody with a nuclear weapon. We've never threatened to use our nuclear weapon against any countries. We have a doctrine which is allow us to use our nuclear weapon in response of using nuclear weapon against our territory. Or if we have huge threat to our sovereignty, to our freedoms, to our state, that's it. We can't threat anybody to use a nuclear weapon first, you know? And that's why it's a hard decision, and we're thinking for a long time how to respond, because it's so dangerous right now. We are really live in the most dangerous time ever, I think. It's more dangerous than Caribbean crisis. It's more dangerous than I don't know, World War I.
Right. You know, Evgeny, you make an interesting point about the use of language, and you know, the word escalation is being used by both sides to justify new developments in the war. Now, President Putin described America's permission to use longer-distance missiles as an escalation, which justifies, of course, his response in changing nuclear protocols and firing the hypersonic missile. But then the West has cited Russia's attacks on civilian infrastructure, its use of Iranian drones, North Korean missiles, and now thousands of North Korean troops as examples of escalation by Russia. So is the idea of escalation now meaningless when it's being used like this?
In my head, there is no idea of escalation. I think we should get security guarantees for Russia and the Russian people as soon as possible, again, on the battlefield or during the negotiations. Of course, right now we can see some recklessness decisions by Biden's administration, which is 2 months left in the White House. But if we're talking about escalation, follow some decisions. Mr. Biden told us that he is allowed to use long-range missiles, American long-range missiles, in response of North Korean soldiers in Kursk region. But would you tell me who saw North Korean soldiers in Kursk region? Even Pentagon doubt about those soldiers exist on our soil. I've been in the Kursk region a few days ago. I didn't see any Koreans, North Koreans, and South Koreans as well. No logic, no North Korean soldiers in Kursk region, but Biden allowed to use long-range missiles against our territory. Then we use new hypersonic missile, just one new hypersonic missile, which is, of course, high technology, and it was with no nuke, without nuclear weapon, without nuclear warheads. We used it not against civilian infrastructure. It was used against military infrastructure, against a military plant, Yuzhmash. That's why we just in the place of responding. We are responding on Western insane decisions.
I understood. Yeah,
we are not running ahead of the West on this stair of escalation.
Understood, Evgeny. I just want to confirm. So I know you say you haven't seen North Korean soldiers, but are you saying they definitely haven't been used by on behalf of Russia?
I don't know. It's a myth. We don't have any confirmation from our military of defense. We don't have any confirmations from our war correspondents. We don't have any confirmation from locals. Try to hide 10,000 people in any territory. You can't do it. You couldn't do it. Nobody found it. Nobody saw it. It's like a myth for me. But the main point is that we don't need North Korean soldiers right now. We have enough recruits. Enough. We have more soldiers than Ukrainians has right now. It was a different situation just a year ago. I don't know for what reason we need North Koreans.
Well, I was going to say, the Financial Times has reported that Yemen's Houthis are also recruiting mercenaries to fight on behalf of Russia. NATO, the US, and the West is reporting that there are killed North Korean soldiers on the battlefield as well. That's why, of course, that story has come out. Now, political and military leaders in the West are desperately trying to anticipate what Donald Trump might do. Do you think the Kremlin actually knows what his plan is? And do you know whether or not President Putin and President-elect Trump have actually spoken since the election?
It was clear from Kremlin administration that we don't have any. We didn't have any call and negotiations between Trump and Putin after he was elected as president. No way. And we don't have. I don't have any information about his plans. I have heard his promise that he will finish this conflict during 24 hours. He will finish this conflict during 24 hours. But I'm not sure he can do it. And don't overestimate the United States. They can't do less than they promise for many years.
Evgeny, just to put it into perspective, thanks, but putting it in perspective, Donald Trump's nominee for National Security Advisor, Michael Waltz, suggested just recently that the incoming administration wishes to bring this war to a responsible end. Now, the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky himself also said what he wants is a fair peace deal. So what does a fair peace deal look like from a Russian perspective?
We have official Kremlin position about this, and we have heard Putin in Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the end of the summer. It was clear that we need security guarantees for Russia and the Russian people. We need to get all our constitutional territories, and we need to get guarantees from the West that Ukraine will not be in NATO alliance.
It's interesting when you look at the two key players on both sides now. President-elect Trump is known as a deal maker who only wants to win. President Putin is known as an equally tough negotiator who doesn't want to lose. So when it comes to striking a peace deal regarding Ukraine, who's going to come out on top? Who wins such a battle? Why?
Our soldiers will win this war and this battle, because if you look on the battlefield, you will see that we're going forward every day. and we capture villages, new villages every day. And now time is on our side, of course, and we will destroy Ukrainian soldiers, Ukrainian army in our Kursk region, I hope very soon, until New Year. And I don't believe at any deal which possible in the next few months. Me personally, maybe it's possible, but I can't find any conditions which we will agree, except those I told you a minute ago. Right. We have to get our territories. We have to get security guarantees, and we have to get no NATO Ukraine.
Okay, so, I want to get your perspective, Evgeny, on something that's in the news at the moment. The Russian state news agency TASS quotes a military source as saying what they call a UK mercenary who's been taken prisoner in the Kursk area of Russia, part of which, of course, Ukraine has held since launching that surprise offensive in August. Now, that mercenary has been named as 22-year-old James Scott Rees-Anderson. From your perspective, what kind of punishment does he face in Russia if he is charged?
No, it's years of prison, and he's not first and he's not last. He will be lucky if he will be subject of exchange. It will be the best for him to be exchanged on our guys who've been captured by Ukrainians. But dozens UK citizens were captured by our army during this conflict. US citizens, Colombian citizens, guys from most of the Western and America's countries. That's nothing new on this news. But what's new? He was first who've been captured in our historical territories. We captured him in Kursk region. That is new, but we've seen before a lot of foreigners which been captured by our army.
Evgeny, as we wrap up, I have to ask you, after Donald Trump won the election, why did your TV show run a segment that purported to congratulate his wife Melania's return to the White House by showing a series of nude and semi-naked pictures of her? You look like you were having fun with it, but was that designed to humiliate the president-elect, and isn't there a risk of provoking him?
We're doing news for Russians and for Russian-speaking people. And, of course, Melania is a respectable woman. He didn't do any bad for Russians, and she's beautiful. Why shouldn't we show her? We got those pictures from open sources, from old magazines. It's the usual work for journalists to show what we have.
Well, I appreciate you joining us, Evgeny, and I'm looking forward to having a chance to chat with you as, of course, the story develops. Evgeny Popov, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Well, my final guest today is the Ukrainian Member of Parliament, Oleksiy Goncharenko. His father was the mayor of Odessa, one of the cities that has come under intense Russian bombardment in recent days. I wanted to get his take on the mood in Ukraine in light of recent escalations and also his reaction to Donald Trump's choice of special envoy for Ukraine. Oleksiy Goncharenko, thank you for joining the show. Now, I'll start by asking you, what do you make of President-elect Donald Trump's choice of the retired General Keith Kellogg as his special envoy to end the Ukraine-Russia conflict?
Yeah, I think this is a very good choice. I welcome this choice, and from all options, I think this is a very strong choice. General Kellogg, first of all, is a very experienced person. Secondly, he is in the context, and he is strong and hawkish on Iran, on China, on Russia, and that is good because all these axis of powers, which includes these countries, they understand only language of strength. And I think that General Kellogg is capable for this.
Now, when it comes to the new administration, we know now Donald Trump's picks for Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, National Security. Does that group present a more or less hopeful prospect than many feared during the election campaign when J.D. Vance said he didn't care what happened to Ukraine?
You know, for me, it's more optimistic because all the people you mentioned, especially Senator Rubio, whom I know personally, really strong and very good. And next, National Security Advisor Waltz, also very good. So I think it shows that these people are strong and that President-elect Trump is trying to take the best possible people. And I think that they can do a very good job.
Well, Mr. Goncharenko, how should Donald Trump approach negotiations with President Vladimir Putin, and how should President Zelensky approach talks with either of them?
I will allow myself to give some advices just because I really know what Russia is. And the main advice is to be strong. Peace through strength. That's the only way, because Putin does not understand anything else in the world. Anything else. The second thing, don't believe Putin. When Putin is saying something, it means nothing. That's you need to remember. And the third advice is not to believe and not to follow Russian bluffing, because there will be a lot of bluffing and chantage that should not scare American representatives, and I hope it will not.
Considering what you just said, sir, what would an acceptable peace deal look like to Ukraine then?
What is the best peace deal for us is complete, full restoration of Ukrainian territorial integrity, and by this, restoration of international law and international order. How it will be in practice, I don't know. But next thing, which is so important, is the security guarantees, because we want really peace and not a ceasefire. And only security guarantees can prevent Russia from new invasion. So that is very, very important.
Well, Russia seems to be advancing on the battlefield faster than in past months. Are you worried that the battle lines could change in Russia's favor before any ceasefire takes place?
Yeah, it can happen. The Russians are advancing. We can't say that there is no blitzkrieg, there is no breakthrough from Russians, but it's a kind of advancing in the style of the First World War, just taking some trench after trench, 100 meters after 100 meters. Yeah, it's painful for us, it's our land, but it looks like they are advancing, and for the moment, we can't stop them. For this, we need more weaponry now, and I hope we will receive it. This will help us enormously. More air defense, more long-range capabilities, and more sanctions against Russia, because the only thing which gives them possibility to continue to advance is that their war chest is full. And more sanctions, especially against oil and gas, that is something we're looking for. And here, President-elect Donald Trump has a very good position from my point of view. As he said, I will drill, drill, drill. And that will lead to that will definitely influence the oil prices, which will definitely influence Russia.
Well, on our previous guest on this episode, the Russian MP and TV host Evgeny Popov, told me there's no evidence that North Korean troops are supporting Russian forces in Kursk, as has been reported. Have you seen any evidence of their involvement?
In this case, I would like to ask what they're doing in Kursk region. So you see, even Russian so-called MP because they don't have a parliament. It's not their way of their country. They're not democracy. So they just have something which they call the parliament. But even him, and he is quite famous Russian propagandist, even him is not arguing that North Koreans are in Kursk region. And you can open the map of the world and ask yourself what North Koreans are doing in thousands and thousands and thousands of miles and kilometers from their home.
Well, either way, with or without North Korean reinforcements, could Ukrainian forces withstand a substantial counterattack? And how important is that region as a bargaining chip in future negotiations?
It is important, and we are fighting there, trying to keep the lines. We will see how it will develop. In any way, Russians need to pay a lot of attention to this region, which is also good for us, which diminishes their possibility to pay attention to Ukrainian regions under attack. So we will see. It's the war. It's very hard to predict anything in the war.
Mr. Goncharenko, how much difference are long-range missiles making? And is it potentially too little, too late?
For the moment, it is too little, too late, but in any way, we welcome it and we are thankful for this. And we hope that more will arrive. They are making difference, and they can make much bigger difference if we will receive these missiles in a big number.
Now, one thing the former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has done, he's accused European leaders and the new Labour government in Britain of failing to do enough to make their continued support for Ukraine clear. Does he have a point? Do Ukrainians feel let down?
No. Well, about British government, we don't have any question. British government is supportive, like it was in the time of Prime Minister Johnson, which I'm very thankful for him, especially the first months of invasion. His role was really great in uniting the world for supporting Ukraine. But then all other prime ministers, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, now Keir Starmer, they're doing a great job. United Kingdom is a real partner and real friend. But we need to remember that it's not a charity from the United Kingdom, but fulfilling of their responsibilities. In 1994, in December, so exactly 30 years ago, it was United Kingdom and the United States which made Ukraine to give up our nuclear weaponry to Russia. And they gave us security guarantees in the form of Budapest Memorandum, which is now we can only laugh on this because it happens that it's not a guarantee. But in any way, United Kingdom and the United States, they have a responsibility to help Ukraine in the situation we are. Because if not their influence 30 years ago, and if Ukraine would have nuclear weaponry that we had, never, ever what had happened with us would not happen.
Well, Boris Johnson also surprised a few people when he likened President Putin to Adolf Hitler and President Zelensky to Winston Churchill. Do you think that's a fair analogy?
The first part definitely is. The second, only history can give the answers. So I can tell you that it's not about just President Zelensky. It's about Ukrainian people and the fight of Ukrainian people that made also Zelensky as a representative of Ukrainian people really famous. But what is historical is not just one personality, which is President Zelensky. Again, we will finally estimate him later, but Ukrainian people and our will for freedom. And I think this is unprecedented.
As things have escalated, President Putin has talked about using his new Oreshnik hypersonic missiles to strike what he calls Ukraine's decision-making centers. What do you think he means by that, and how seriously are you taking such threats?
Now we see the big campaign by Putin, campaign of blackmailing and threatening of the world with these Oreshnik missiles. In reality, nobody knows how effective it was. I can tell you where Oreshnik strike happened, there is no big result. What does it mean? I don't know how effective really it is. Secondly, how many of these Oreshnik missiles really Russia has? We also don't know this. So it looks more like a bluffing from Putin. And in any way, I want to tell you, we're not afraid of his threats because we know with whom we deal. This is existential for us. And Russia is already using everything they can against us. So if they would have everything they have except nukes they're using. And the only reason they're not using nukes, because it will be a physical end for themselves and for Putin included. That's why they're not using it.
Well, sir, give us some idea what effect the latest Russian attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure has had on civilian life as winter approaches. And is this a marked escalation or simply a continuation of Russia's ongoing strategy?
It's continuation. They started this 2 years ago. It will be already the third winter like this. Russians, that is a Russian war playbook, their warfare style, to terrorize civilians, to make them suffer, to make their life unbearable. That's what they're doing. And they did it, something like this in Syria, in order to cause the migration waves. They did it in many other places before. So they continue this brutal style. What are the results? Millions of Ukrainians are without electricity today. There are problems with heating, with water supply. Yeah, but it's nothing new for us. That's something which happens already for the third winter.
Well, on the point of strategy, we've been hearing reports and claims that Russia's also been involved in a kind of hybrid warfare involving sabotage and cyber attacks. The Kremlin has denied such strategy, but what's your understanding of the situation?
What to deny? Russia is making hybrid attacks, sabotage attacks, terroristic attacks throughout the whole world, especially in Europe. Salisbury, where they used chemical weapons, or DHL airplane, which falls in Vilnius in Lithuania just days ago after there were information from European intelligence that Russia is going to attack DHL flights. All their attacks against depots, all their cyber attacks, all their attacks against infrastructure like cables, like internet, and so on and so on. So Russia is conducting a full-scale hybrid war against the civilized world.
Well, final thought, Mr. Goncharenko. What's your response to the popular podcaster Joe Rogan's derogatory comments about President Zelensky and Joe Biden, accusing them of escalating the conflict to a point that could trigger a nuclear world war?
I want to invite Mr. Rogan to Ukraine. I want to show him what's happening there on the ground. And I think in this case, his thoughts and his views will change significantly. So if you want to comment something, it's very good to know about this a little bit more than just to read something in media, especially in Russian media.
Well, Alexei Goncharenko, thank you very much for giving us a perspective on the show.
Thank you.
And that's all for this episode of the show. I'm Riz Khan from me and the team. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.
Paris, the world's most romantic city. People love it for its culture, fashion, architecture, and food, and is considered the dream destination of many. The French capital has some of the most beautiful and historic buildings and monuments. The most famous of all is the Eiffel Tower, one of the most iconic constructions in the world. There's the Arc de Triomphe at the end of the Champs-Élysées. The Notre Dame Cathedral, which dates back to 1163, is the most visited attraction. Located high above the city in Montmartre is the Sacré-Cœur Basilica. And of course, the Louvre Museum, which contains the Mona Lisa and many other works of art. Don't forget the La Conciergerie, famous as a prison, a historical landmark during the French Revolution in the 1790s. Here, you can see Marie Antoinette's prison cell, which was converted into a chapel in her memory. One can still follow the many traces of the French Revolution in this contemporary city. There's the Place de la Concorde and the Cour des Commerces, where the Marat, the extremist, published his newspaper L'Ami du Peuple. Seeped into the city's DNA is, of course, Paris's well-known heritage in arts and culture. Explore the cobblestone streets of Montmartre with its rich history of Belle Epoque artists and cabarets, or get a first-hand experience of the lifestyle in the neighborhood of Belleville. Get your culture fix at the Musée d'Orsay, at the newly renovated Picasso Museum, or course through the dozens of small museums and galleries you can visit in the city. Shopaholics will also delight in Paris's myriad options. From chic department stores that'll have all your fashion needs ready to famed boutiques for sheer designer items. Stroll along the Champs-Élysées or watch the fashion shows. If you're traveling during the Christmas season, be sure to check out the fancy window displays. There are also places to find the best fine jewelry. You'd also want to visit any of the famous neighborhood bakeries that sell perfect Parisian bread, made using traditional French techniques. Paris also has an impressive offering of food stops. The city boasts of 70 Michelin-starred restaurants. You'll find one for every specialty, from fresh premium oysters to award-winning edible works of art, like the famous pastries in Paris.
Hello and welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive insights and fresh perspectives from leading experts and influential decision makers every weekday here on Al-Arabiya News. I'm Tom Burges Watson, and coming up on today's programme, with the ouster of the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, refugees around the world are now weighing the possibility of returning to their homeland. Moscow grants asylum to the fallen Syrian leader. We ask President Putin's former spokesperson why Russia's decided to do this. And the United States says it is monitoring the situation in Syria. Meanwhile, the incoming President Donald Trump says that involvement by Iran and Russia has weakened those countries, but that this is not America's fight. Hello and welcome to the programme. We begin with the latest from Syria, where the regime of Bashar al-Assad fell during the course of the weekend. Well, after a decade of conflict, Syria is still the world's largest refugee crisis. But now the future for Syrians could be about to change, as many people in neighbouring countries like Turkey, as well as in the UK and Germany, are talking about finally returning home. Well, from the Turkish-Syrian border, Hamad Mahmoud, a Syrian originally from Deir ez-Zor, who's been living in Turkey for the past 9 years, says he's thrilled to be finally returning home. He says he feels like a bird ready to fly.
I'm going to my country. I'm going to Syria, my country. Actually, I feel now, I didn't feel like this moment. I didn't before this time. I feel like bird, like I want to fly to sky because I'm so happy. Our country is free now.
Well, for Syrians still in Syria, the news of Assad's fall brought a wave of jubilation. Many celebrated and rejoiced. Let's take a listen to what some of them had to say.
I am out and about, and there's nothing to be afraid of. The situation in the country is good. We just hope to get the economy moving again.
This criminal, corrupt regime, Assad and his father, has brought us nothing but anger, injustice, torture, and a lack of livelihood. My father was in the Syrian army. He used to warn us that the walls have ears when we were younger. So when we asked about what was happening in Hama, or what this criminal regime was up to, he would remind us that we were being listened to, and that could lead to his execution.
At this very moment we are well and safe. The burden, depression and internal sadness have been lifted from our chests. We've been depressed ever since 1963 until now.
Well, since 2011, more than 14 million Syrians have been forced to flee their homes looking for safety. Well, more than 7.2 million Syrians are living displaced within their own country. Around 5.5 million others are living in Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq and Egypt. Well, let's get more now, and we can speak to Walid Safour, who served as the first representative of the Syrian National Coalition to the UK and who is the founder and the president of the Syrian Human Rights Committee. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. We just listened to some people there expressing their hopes for the future of Syria. Some people summing this up as being a hopeful but uncertain future for your country. Does that sound about right?
Of course, we are so happy and so pleased for the fall of the dictator regime. But we have a genuine apprehension about the future. And we hope that no international involvement to abolish our pleasure and our happiness. We are so happy that this regime, which deprived us from our homeland for around 45 years, to come from the window after we have been driven from the door by the Syrian youth who left Syria while they were 10 years old and returned. They are now 24 and 25 years old, and they fought with the restraint, and they were observing the instructions given to them to be good and to be very disciplined with all the people, even the enemies, even the people who tortured them. But what happened next is the crucial one for us. Now the Syrian regime, Bashar al-Assad, has fled to Russia. And Russia, I wonder, they accepted him as a refugee for humanitarian reasons. What sort of reasons for a criminal of war? Yesterday, people come out from the prisons, from Sinai prisons, from other prisons, and disastrous stories were told. Children at the age of 1 and 2 years were born in the prisons and the detention centers. People who lost their senses, their eyes, and still tens of thousands of people who were still lost in the Syrian prisons, and their families are looking for them everywhere. So what reasons for Russia to keep this prisoner of war and this criminal to accept him as a refugee for humanitarian reason? There is no reason but to be brought to justice in Syria or before the international community if they are not safe about him in Syria.
Okay, Walid, I just want to ask you about those discoveries at the Sednaya prison. Does that go beyond your worst nightmares in terms of what you thought that the Assad regime was capable of?
I think now we are beyond the Assad regime, and we hope for a civilian rule, for civilian government, for a rule of justice, for a rule of equality, and there's no discrimination according to sect or to religion or to whatever. We are looking for democracy and all the people were alike in front of the rule of law. No one is above the other. This is what all the Syrian people are looking for at this moment, except the criminals, except those who regarded Syria as a field and farm for their own interest. This is what we are looking for now. And I think we started a new era now, and we started a new struggle for democracy and for equality and for justice, for the role of law in Syria.
Are you hopeful for this period of transition, and when do you think realistically elections could be held?
I'm very hopeful that a transition period will come forward, except if there are the anti-change will be involved with the aid of international parties. And I hope that the international community will regard and took into consideration the past 60 years of past rule and 54 years of Assad rules, the rules in black blood on their hands, and not to be involved in a dirty tricks against the Syrian people.
We've heard from Tehran. Iran says that the revolution against Bashar al-Assad was an American-Israeli plot to, quote, destabilize the Middle East and redraw its political map. They're saying that this anti-Assad sentiment wasn't in fact homegrown. It came from overseas. How do you respond to that?
What they have done from 2012, Tehran and its agencies brought from Lebanon, from Asia, from Afghanistan, from Pakistan, all its militias, they contributed to the mischief of the Syrian people. They killed Syrian people. They butchered us. I'm from the city of Homs. What have they done in the city of Qusayr, in the province of Homs? They displaced all people of Al-Qusayr city, and it was occupied by what is called Hezbollah. It is the party of the Satan. This is what happened. And they come to the neighborhood one by one, and they butchered us. They killed my close relatives. They killed the husband of my nephew, my nieces. Two of them were killed, butchered, with the kitchen knife. This is what Tehran has done. It is not the other parties. The first party to be claimed for our mischief is Tehran and then Russia. They aided this criminal regime to survive for this 13 years of the Syrian upheaval and against this dictatorship of al-Assad's regime.
Are you feeling that the country is heading now in the sort of direction that you would want to actually return to Syria? Is that something you're thinking about doing yourself, along with the many millions of Syrians who live overseas?
I hope, and all the sincere Syrians who wanted the interest of their country, they hope that the country is heading towards a healthy future, towards democracy, towards equality, towards justice, towards to leave this black past of the dictatorship to reconciliation with all its components. This is what we are hope, and I've been in contact with many Syrians in the diaspora and inside Syria and in the countries around Syria where many Syrians are living. We've been in contact with them in the last few days, and all of them are hoping for a better Syria, for Syria where reconciliation was brought about among the Syrian people, all of them. We are not against anyone, only we are against those who committed crimes, who killed, who tortured, who took the decisions against the Syrian people. We are against only about these, and these are very few. Other than that, nobody is against any other body.
Okay, and just lastly, I mean, looking at the composition of Syria's new leadership, lots of different groups, lots of different ideologies and ideas for the future of Syria, and indeed some from the old guard, because the former Prime Minister Mohammed Jalali is part of the transition. Aren't you worried that such a disparate group of people could end up infighting and there'll be more chaos to come?
I think our people has learned a lot of lessons from the past, when they were apart and when they fought each other. Now all of them are looking for a better Syria, for a future where all Syrians are alike. And I think as long as all the people are heading like that, and they are trying to overcome all difficulties. I know there are a lot of difficulties in our march towards arriving the last goal and the last end. But I think we are looking for the wise people to overcome all of these with all people in order to reach it. And I hope they will not lose the last chance and come back to give a chance to counter change people in order to abolish this. I don't want to say it's a revolution. It's a change towards equality, towards democracy, towards human rights, towards justice, towards equality in Syria.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. We really appreciate it. Walid Safour, thank you.
Thank you very much.
The fall of the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad is seen as a blow to Russian prestige and military influence, and these developments are expected to have a serious impact on President Vladimir Putin's military power. Well, Moscow has kept a naval base in the Syrian city of Tartus since the Cold War, and Russia has relied on its air base in Syria's Latakia province as a hub for projecting power in the Middle East. Well, Bashar al-Assad and his family have been granted asylum by Russia. Well, regarding the future of Russia's military bases in Syria, the Kremlin says they are taking necessary precautions to secure them.
It is too early to talk about this. In any case, this is all a subject for discussion with those who will be in power in Syria. Of course, everything that is necessary is being done now. We are getting in touch with those who can provide security. And of course, our military is taking all necessary precautions.
Well, let's get more analysis now. We can speak to Sergei Markov, who is the former spokesperson of President Vladimir Putin, who joins us from Moscow. Thank you very much for joining us once again on Al-Arabiya News. Earlier on today, we saw images of the Syrian embassy in Moscow. A new flag has been hoisted outside that embassy. What message do you think that sends?
This is message not only from Russian, but first of all from the ambassador of Syria. He not only changed the flag from former government to the new government, but also he very strongly criticized previous leader of Syria, Bashar al-Assad. He told us about corruption, about bad ruling of the country. So this is decision not Russian authority, but it's decision of the ambassador of the Syria to Russia. It's first.
Hasn't the world been telling you for the last 13 years that the regime of Bashar al-Assad was corrupt, amongst other things?
I think no doubt that Bashar al-Assad government was corrupted. But I suppose that not too much compared with another governments in the Middle East countries. So from Russian point of view, Bashar al-Assad not an ideal politician, but probably his opponent was a little bit worse. And also I should stress that Russia give a strong recommendation to Bashar al-Assad to have political reform, first of all to the democratization, and federalization of Syria, and for including of the opposition leader to the Syrian government. But Bashar al-Assad denied this advice of Russian government. Also, you can look at the streets of the Syria, and you will see that it was a lot of portraits of Vladimir Putin and the Russian flags, something about 5, 6 years ago. But no portrait of Vladimir Putin and the Russian flags last 2 years. So Bashar al-Assad stepped down from Russia, and it was one of the reasons for collapse of his regime.
But his regime could have collapsed many years ago, and it would have done, as the Syrian people wanted it to, were it not for the fact that Russia helped Bashar al-Assad kill about 500,000 of his own people. Do you admit that Moscow had a role in that?
Yes, Moscow played a role in such a civil war. But I should repeat, it's not because Russia saw Bashar al-Assad as an ideal political leader, but because Russia saw that Islamic State was a main enemy of Bashar al-Assad, and who attacked Damascus was much more worse than Bashar al-Assad. So Russia, first of all, helped to crash such radical Islamists like Islamic states in Syria. It was the main Russian deal. Then Russia tried to help Bashar al-Assad to make transformation to the more inclusive, more democratic, more federalist government in Syria, but was not successful in doing this, probably because Bashar al-Assad preferred to listen to more Iranian friends than Russian friends.
But only last week, Russia was carrying out airstrikes in and around the city of Homs to try to stall the advance of the advancing opposition, which is now in Damascus in power. So Russia's involvement in stopping the revolution to overthrow Bashar al-Assad continued right up until last week, didn't it?
Exactly. Russian militaries continue to serve their duty according to the agreement between Russian and Syrian government. It's a Russian style of doing, where responsible people who follow all treaties, but not violating them, not making, maneuvering in the ancient East style. So Russian military continues this, and of course the opposition was not happy about this. But at the same time, Vladimir Putin already mentioned yesterday that sometime Russian military aviation helped Syrian opposition in the cases when they fight against Islamic State. And this continued, this Russian help to the Syrian opposition continued all these years. Russian role was not to support Bashar al-Assad, but not to allow Islamic State to take power in Syria. And this goal has been reached.
Okay, I mean, listening to what people on the streets of Damascus are saying, they're saying, we are very relieved, we feel reassured now because we were scared. It was like living a nightmare inside a big prison, said one person. And I think a lot of Syrians view Russia as having prolonged this nightmare by propping up Bashar al-Assad many years after he should have left office. How do you respond to that?
Of course, when now opponents of Bashar al-Assad, who signed the military treaty with Russia, his opposition took power, of course, you can see on the streets of Damascus, first of all, the opinions which reflect this point of view. But at the same time, when we look, for example, on Afghanistan, we will see that first Afghan people very strongly criticize Soviet Union, so-called Shuravi. But now they're talking, if they can compare Americans, British, Russians, of course, they prefer Russians because they are honest and they're responsible person. Same, I think, will be in Syria. And we will look at the behavior of the new government. if new government will make a repression against Christians, against another minorities, probably Russia will have bad relation with this new government, and Russia will have problem with its military base. But if this government will be not strong radical Islamists, but will be moderate and modern Islamist power, probably Russia will be able to build a good relationship with this new government. So we're Russians. We don't afraid to have better relationship with bad guys. But if these guys will be good, we'll have good relationship with them.
Well, that's as may be. We spoke to someone just before we crossed you from the Syrian National Coalition who described Russia and Iran as being criminal states that had propped up the dictator who was Bashar al-Assad. Do you think it's really realistic to think they're going to want to work with Russia after all this?
No, it's not realistic. I think people in Syria and the new Syrian government very much differ Iran from Russia. Everybody understands that Bashar al-Assad have been first of all under the control of Iranian politicians. He was more or less proxy of Iran, and Iranian troops play important role on the land. And as Alavis, who is part of Shiites, Bashar al-Assad was part of this big Shiite coalition on the Middle East. And as I understand, people on the streets, first of all, believe that they broken Bashar al-Assad and they beaten also Iran, but not Russia.
I don't know if you've seen the pictures, but we've been getting lots of images of the reality of life under Bashar al-Assad, notably from the Sednaya prison in Damascus. I expect you've seen pictures as well, horrific images of how people were treated, including children who were kept in those prisons. After having killed about 500,000 of his own people, Moscow's decided to give Bashar al-Assad asylum. Why?
Because we believe for the humanitarian reasons, he should be alive. Also, when you look at the Bashar al-Assad and compare him with another actors, we can see that their behavior also very barbaric. Look, for example, on the Netanyahu. He killed almost 50,000 Palestinians in Gaza just in half of the year. And also, if we look at the Iranian and Iraqi and another leaders, they also are quite cruel. But if you look at the Bashar al-Assad, beginning of his ruling, he tried to make liberal reforms. And I think he keep his this idea to move step by step Syria to the more inclusive.
But you're being very generous.
Reform, but what not able to do.
You're being very generous. He had 24 years to enact some reforms. He didn't do it, so he failed from the beginning, didn't he?
When Bashar al-Assad took power, first of all, he started liberal reforms, and he conducted them during 5 or 6 years. But after these liberal reforms opened the window for military attacks of his opponent against him, he stopped such liberal reforms. Of course, difficult to expect from any leaders during the civil war to be liberals. I think liberals usually don't take Kalashnikov.
Just lastly, would you hand over Bashar al-Assad to so he can face international justice? Would Russia do that?
I think Russia will not trust to international justice. If you look at the behavior of the International Criminal Court, which started attack against Vladimir Putin because Vladimir Putin saved thousands of the children in Ukraine. If you look at such international organization, do it mostly under the control of the Western countries who support absolutely barbaric terrorist-style Ukrainian regime, you understand, no trust to any international organization which is under the control of Western countries.
OK, thank you for speaking to us. Sergei Markov, that's all we have time for. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure.
Meanwhile, the United States is weighing its options to react to these latest developments in Syria, as analysts say that the Biden administration may have been caught off guard with the rapid downfall of the former Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Meanwhile, US ally Israel says it has seized control of a demilitarized buffer zone in the Golan Heights. It also says it's going to step up airstrikes on Syria if required. Well, both Israel and the United States are watching the fall of the former President Bashar al-Assad with concern as armed groups with extremist ideologies, they say, have taken over the reins. Well, US President Joe Biden, meanwhile, has called on Syrians to, quote, forge their own future, free of the opposition. This while also expanding on the administration's intentions moving forwards. Well, the US will engage with Syrian troops alongside the UN to establish this transition. This, according to the president, who said these comments on social media. Well, President Biden also says that the United States will help ensure stability in the East and maintain its mission against ISIS in Syria. Well, the US president is also promising to support Syria's neighbors, Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq and Israel, in case of any threats, acknowledging that the fall of the Assad regime brings with it some risk and some uncertainty. Well, President Biden has also claimed that the United States played a part in the downfall of Bashar al-Assad. Let's listen to what he said.
The upshot for all this is, for the first time ever, neither Russia nor Iran nor Hezbollah could defend this abhorrent regime in Syria. And this is a direct result of the blows that Ukraine, Israel have delivered upon their own self-defense with unflagging support of the United States.
Well, for more analysis, we can speak now to James Jeffrey, who is the former US Special Envoy to Syria and Deputy National Security Advisor, who joins us from Washington. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Are you optimistic that there will be and can be an inclusive political transition there in Syria? What are the early signs telling you?
I'm optimistic that it is possible, but only with very active engagement of the three countries that are most involved, which is U.S., Israel, and Turkey, because all three of us have troops on the ground, with the support of the Arabs, Europe, and in particular the UN, which has a specific mandate. So yes, it's possible. And the initial indications are that the people in charge, which is still the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham people, HTS people, under their commander Jolani, are trying to reach out, but we have to watch this very carefully. I think President Biden got it right. This is a historic opportunity, but it is also a time of risk.
Yeah, I mean, the group you just mentioned, HTS is a former affiliate of al-Qaeda. Do you think they should be removed from the list of designated terrorist organizations so that that dialogue can take place?
I think there should be discussions. There are ways in the U.S. government that we can talk with people on the designated terrorist list without being official about it. Those talks should be going on now. It's not something we should give away for nothing. We want to have certain assurances. They begin with the safety of our troops and the continued fight against the Islamic State in the east of the country, but also the protection of our Syrian defense forces, colleagues, the Kurds in the northeast as well.
Just about a month or so left of the Biden administration. We heard from the incoming president, the president-elect Donald Trump, saying Syria is a mess, but it's not our friend. The United States should have nothing to do with it. This is not our fight. Let it play out. Don't get involved. Do you agree with what he said, and do you agree with that course of action?
Well, I agreed with President Trump's equally dismissive attitude towards Syria, blood and sand, when he was president and I was a Syria envoy. But let's try to figure out what he's trying to say in the right context. America went through two terrible wars, Afghanistan and Iraq, where we put hundreds of thousands of troops at the peak, I mean, hundreds of thousands at one time, along with our British friends and a lot of others, to try to change Middle Eastern societies into something that looks like Europe. Those were total failures. Trump is reacting, and he's reacting correctly to that. When he says this, what he means is we don't want to do a nation-building exercise. We won't want to send tens of thousands of troops. But remember, he kept our troops on. He twice ordered them to be withdrawn. Then we all convinced him that it made sense to keep them on, so he agreed. We have huge interests that he understands central to the Middle East and Syria, with our NATO ally Turkey, with our close partner Jordan, our close partner Israel, our close partner Iraq, and on into the Gulf. These things do not allow us simply to walk away.
There is real danger at this moment. I agree there's an opportunity as well, but there is a real danger of instability in Syria and by extension for all the countries that it neighbours and beyond that, isn't there?
Well, yes, but look, we had, and this is a problem in every government, but particularly in American governments, there's always a cloud in even the bluest and cloudless of skies, a little dark cloud, because you have to think that way, but you can't let that get on top of things. This is a great development. Trust me, Syria was a threat to the region for all 11 years of the civil, well, since 2011, 14 years now of the civil war, and even before. It was the platform that Iran used to project power into Gaza, into Lebanon, into Iraq. And it is a huge success for the region that this Iranian axis is broken. We can deal with instability in Syria. I hope it doesn't come to that, but if it does, we can deal with it a lot easier than we dealt with the Iranian threat to the region, because that threat has just produced 14 months of war, total war across the region, the Houthis, Lebanon and Hezbollah, Hamas, Iranian, Israeli missile strikes. So, yeah, this is a good thing for the region. How good, we have to see.
Yeah, I mean, Iran sounding quite nervous, quite understandably nervous about the situation in Syria. We've heard from Iran, in fact, the Iranian news agency Fars saying Bashar was an opportunity for Iran, but he didn't pay enough attention to the recommendations of the Islamic Republic. I mean, just how vulnerable would you say Iran is looking at this particular moment?
First, on that comment, we worked officially and unofficially for years with the Russians. The Russians, all the way up to Putin, who Mike Pompeo and I met in Sochi in 2019, considered a compromise solution under the aegis of the UN and UN Resolution 2254 to reconcile groups and have a new government, even if Assad could be normally in charge. Every time Assad said no, and all indications we got, including from the Russians, is that it was the Iranians who wouldn't let him move. They created this monster. They supported him through the blood of 500,000 Syrians, and they're going to have to live with the wreckage that they created.
I mean, it's been an incredible few months. A lot has happened these last few months. The Hamas leader, Yahya Sinwar, has been killed in Gaza. The Hezbollah leader, Hassan Nasrallah, has been killed in Lebanon. Bashar al-Assad is now no longer in office in Syria. Do you think this means that Israel's security is significantly improved as a result?
To use a quote I like from Apocalypse Now, this smells like victory.
Victory for?
For the entire region, for security, for Israel, for the United States. Look, there's been 6 conflicts in the region. One of them didn't involve Iran, Libya, and it's the one that was easily resolved, although you had the Turks, the French, the Russians, the Emiratis, terrorists, and everybody else involved. It was as messy as any of them, but it quickly came and went in 2020, didn't it? The others, Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, they drag on for years. What's the delta? It's that Iran is involved, and it's part of its proxy strategy for the region. That strategy has just been blown up. This is really good for the region, whatever comes out of Syria.
I don't know if you've heard this, and there's reports that I've been reading that sound like Bashar al-Assad was getting increasingly desperate in his final days in office. It's reported he tried to cut a deal with the United States whereby Assad would sever ties with Hezbollah and the Iranian axis in exchange for help from the West to stem those fighters coming down from the north of Syria. Do you think that's true? And how do you think that was received by Washington?
Well, I think that, I know it is true in the sense that Washington was dangling in front of him. We will lift our sanctions if you cut off ties to Iran, in particular the flow of Iranian weapons to Hezbollah. I think that was true. Assad, in the end, didn't grab it. Whether that would have forestalled this attack from the north, I don't know, because there's no way we would have gone in with him to try to keep those people away.
I mean, there are some who are describing all of this as being one of the biggest turning points for the Middle East in generations. Would you agree with that?
My first involvement was as a captain in Germany, where my unit was put on alert to, with the rest of the military, to go to war with Russia, beginning in the Sinai during the Yom Kippur War. That was a turning point. It led to a whole decade of positive political developments. Then the region went into war again. Then it emerged with the liberation of Kuwait. We had another decade of great diplomatic achievements. And then with the rise of al-Qaeda and American blunders in Iraq and Afghanistan and Iran's rise, we went back into crisis again. So it is cyclic, but this is one of the big movements in the region. It gives us, the U.S., us, the West, us, most importantly, the people of the region, the chance to try to get it right this time.
Turkey, one of the key parties at the table that you mentioned just a short while ago. Turkey says it wants to guarantee security in Syria after the fall of Bashar al-Assad. What do you think they've got in mind in Ankara?
Well, we have to obviously talk to them, and we are. But the point is, this has to be a sovereign, independent state. Obviously, Turkey has important security interests along its southern border. They have to be secured, just like Israel and Jordan, Lebanon, and Iraq do. And the United States has general regional interests as a partner of all of these countries. So we'll see what comes out. But again, Israel, the U.S., and Turkey all have troops in country. That is an important factor.
And what about Russia? Something of a humiliation here, would you say, for the Kremlin, given that years of support for the Assad regime have turned out in this way? And of course, that war in Ukraine hasn't advanced in quite the way people in Moscow had hoped it would. It's been dragging on for 3 years now, and it's taken a huge amount of money and a huge number of lives. I mean, do you think all of this does spell problems for Moscow?
Well, absolutely problems, but the question is whether they are decisive. I think this is another nail in Putin's grave, in Putin's casket, but I don't, coffin rather, but I don't know how many more nails it will take to put him out of business. Ukraine has been a failure despite recent incremental gains on the ground. And this was a huge defeat for him. But the Russians aren't out of the game yet in Syria. They'll try to keep their bases, and they'll negotiate with who's ever in charge.
That's if they're willing to talk to them. And just lastly, I mean, let's go back to where we started, just to wrap up. Are you concerned, as a lot of people are for Syria, happy as they are, as we've been hearing from a lot of people on the ground in Syria, but they are concerned about the uncertainties ahead, not least the fact that these various factions that are now running the country have different ideologies. They only had one thing in common, which is they wanted Bashar al-Assad to go. He's gone. Are you confident, or are you concerned about them working together and moving forward?
Oh, it's going to be terribly difficult, it may feel. Again, look at the example of Libya. A lot of outside major power intervention, a lot of splits, terrorists, the whole, the whole smorgasbord of problems. But the international community has managed with Libya pretty well. We can manage with Syria, I think, because the main thing that is now absent is Iran. I cannot underline how effective, particularly with Qasem Soleimani, Iran was over 20 years in using these regional conflicts and all of these messy situations you described to advance its regional hegemonic agenda. Well, that agenda is now crashed and burned.
OK, well, we're going to have to leave it there, but we really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. James Jeffrey, former US Special Envoy to Syria and Deputy National Security Advisor, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.
Well, staying with US reaction to these developments in Syria, the US President-elect Donald Trump said earlier on that the Russian President Vladimir Putin had, quote, lost all interest in Syria because of Ukraine. Well, he also praised Israel's fighting success, he said, adding that Russia and Iran are now in a weakened state. Well, for more analysis, we can speak now to Simone Ledeen, who is a former US Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Middle East Policy. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. This is being described as one of the biggest turning points for the Middle East in generations. Of course, I'm talking about the fall of Bashar al-Assad. Do you agree with that?
I do, yes. This is a tectonic plate level shift in the Middle East, and I think anyone who wants to draw any conclusions at this point is quite premature. I think we're all watching it play out in front of us without a clear idea of exactly where this shift will stop.
Do you think it's likely that Washington is engaging with Syria's new leaders?
I believe, according to the media reports that I've seen and what I'm hearing from folks in my network, they are working to engage with them. I hope at the same time they're also engaging, and I believe they are with Turkey, as Turkey plays a large role in influencing these groups as well.
Yeah, I mean, the group in particular that we've been talking most about is, of course, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or as it's known as HTS. I mean, there are concerns about them, not least because they are former affiliates of al-Qaeda. But do you think they really have changed their spots?
Well, I think that's an interesting question, and I don't believe that we can draw any conclusions based on promises. I think the international community needs to be monitoring their activities to see and assert for ourselves if HTS has indeed changed its spots. I think time will tell. I certainly wouldn't want to be premature, though, in making these assumptions or stating categorically one way or another that a group with such a long history and such a close affiliation with al-Qaeda indeed has sort of left that organization. I think another important point is the congratulatory messages to HTS from extremist groups across the world. I think that's also very telling and should be included in any clear-headed evaluation of what HTS is today and what their plans for the future might be.
Yeah, and how do you rate the chances of all these different factions in Syria of working together? Do you think they're going to be able to, or do you think it's just a matter of time before they start fighting each other?
I think a more realistic approach to this might be a broad realization that the country of Syria, as we've known it to this point, doesn't really exist anymore, and that it might be more beneficial to consider different regional areas that are governed by different groups. I think that might be more practical and might lead to a more sort of sustained peace rather than these very disparate groups with, frankly, different goals for them to try to work together. I'm not sure that's a realistic approach, frankly.
Okay, so you think there's a likelihood of Syria, as we know it, being divided. We know that Donald Trump has sent his future Middle East advisor, Masad Boulos, to the region. He arrived during the course of the weekend. He's discussing the situation. I mean, how do you see the Trump administration shaping developments in this region?
Well, first and foremost, I would point out President Trump's very public, President-elect Trump's very public social media post saying, we must stay out of this. There's no U.S. interest in this right now. I believe what he meant was, and this was still at a time when the Assad regime had not formally fallen, although I think it was clear it was going to. I think in that context, Trump was stating clearly, we have no interest in this. There's no American interest here. I think now, as we're looking at the future of the region and specifically Syria and all of the different international players who are involved in Syria, there certainly is a U.S. interest there. And so it is gratifying to see that one of his top advisors is already making moves in the region. I think it really only will benefit us in the long run. And it's so clear now, with a little over a month to go before President Trump takes office, that he's already starting to make his moves and to assert what his new administration will be promoting. And I personally very much look forward to that.
Okay, I mean, obviously, one of the things that President Trump has said is that this has been damaging for Iran and Russia. I mean, they are, of course, two countries that have exerted considerable influence over Syria. I mean, just how damaging do you think the fall of Bashar al-Assad has been for those two countries?
I think it's been, particularly for Iran, it's been absolutely devastating. I think for Russia, it remains to be seen. I saw reports leading up to this program that Russia intends to maintain its forces in Syria. So we'll see, Tartus in particular, we'll see how that plays out. And if they're able to do that, and if HTS and its allies will fight that or not. But I do think, with respect to Iran, it showed how devastated, in particular, Hezbollah has been by the Israeli defensive attacks against Hezbollah, and they've completely decapitated not only the leadership, but also the significant weapon stockpiles that Hezbollah has been building for decades now. So they were completely incapable of acting, incapable of defending Assad, who allowed them to continue to move weapons between Iran and the border with Israel for all of these years. So Iran is effectively defanged. If they were going to make a move, they would have. They just can't. So I think this has been devastating for Iran. And certainly Erdogan in Turkey saw the opportunity, saw how defanged the Iranian regime is, and therefore, with the groups that he's been supporting, made his move, and that's what we're seeing play out now.
You mentioned those weapons stockpiles across Syria. There are also some pretty dangerous weapons. I mean, obviously, all weapons are dangerous, but I'm talking in particular about the possibility of there being chemical weapons amongst them. Do you think that's likely?
Unfortunately, yes, I do think that's likely, and in violation as well of an earlier agreement that was made with Russia, who had promised to make sure that Syria got rid of the stockpiles that it had of chemical weapons and did not begin producing new chemical weapons. So that's an important question that I think that we should all be looking at and questioning as the international community. But yes, it is incredibly concerning that these weapons might still exist and be in Syria, and worst case scenario, fall into the hands of people who would want to use them, especially against innocent civilians. So I hope there's a serious effort underway. I know President Biden made a comment about it, but chemical weapons, I think, for those of us who have any experience in that world, incredibly concerning because they're so easy to hide, to move. Obviously, there are protocols that are needed to protect the carrier from actually, getting caught up and misusing them or mishandling them. But at the same time, we need to make sure that they're destroyed or that they're protected. The stockpiles are destroyed in a safe manner. And so, yes, I'm very concerned about that. And I think the international community would be as well.
Bashar al-Assad has been granted asylum in Moscow, we understand. He's presumably not going to have much to do now that he doesn't have a country to run. He had a sophisticated PR machine working on his behalf in Damascus. In particular, they succeeded in confusing journalists and confusing the world about the realities on the ground in Syria. What needs to be done to ensure that Bashar al-Assad and that PR machine don't carry on from a distance, trying to confuse and divide the country of Syria as it undergoes this new transition?
I think that's a very interesting question. The best thing that I believe that we all can do is to highlight and call out the propaganda and the lies where we see them. As you pointed out, a lot of the propaganda that has been disseminated has been proven to be false, and that is a great place to start. I think the credibility of the organizations that propagated this has been drastically undermined, and so I think it's important as we move forward to point out how indeed this has been propaganda and how perhaps some of us were fooled in the past, but now we see the reality on the ground of what has happened and what is happening in the future. And I think with Bashar al-Assad now in Moscow and out of Syria and without access to a lot of the institutions that he was using to do this, I think it will be much more clear moving forward.
Okay, and just lastly, Simone, I mean, we've all been looking at these developments in Syria with disbelief. I've been covering the story for 13 years. You've probably been covering it for a similar amount of time, obviously with a different hat on. But what's really stood out for you out of all the images that we've seen coming out of Syria these last 48 hours or so? What's really struck you the most?
I think above all, the images out of Sidnaya prison, where there appear to still be people who are trapped inside the prison, and they're trying to figure out how to get them out. They're actually images that recall to me images from World War II and the liberation of the concentration camps and the faces of the people who were liberated. It's incredibly just emotional, really hard to put into words the suffering of those people, and the fact that they're getting freed now. I think there's a lot of reason to feel apprehension about the future, very real reasons too. But I think also important to take a moment to celebrate the release of these people, many of whom were political prisoners who their crimes were minor compared to what they've suffered since. And so to me, these are really the most powerful images so far. And I hope I hope for Syria, for the Syrian people, a new day and an opportunity for self-determination and in a positive direction and a peaceful direction. And I think the international community hopes that for them as well.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Simone Ledeen, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, that is all we have time for on Global News today. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Be sure to join us again tomorrow for more exclusive interviews. Until then, bye-bye.
Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Arabiya News.
It's very impressive.
Where knowledge meets perspective.
Prime Minister, I'd like to kick off by asking you to walk us through how you see the election of Donald Trump playing out in this part of the world, and specifically what it means for your government?
Well, thank you for this opportunity. Obviously, we congratulate the United States for having a successful election. This is a decision for the American people to decide what kind of a government they want. But obviously, as you said, a decision made in the United States have an effect on the globe and definitely on our region as well. We've had an experience with the previous government of President Trump. And this time also, we are hoping that the U.S. administration is going to maintain good relations with the region, with Iraq, and in particular with the Kurdistan region that's been a very credible partner with the United States in the fight against terrorism and also in promoting peace and developing the shared values and principles that we have with each other. It's a little premature to decide how it will play out. We have to wait until the whole cabinet is picked and decided, but we definitely have friends among people that we hear are being considered to be in the next government.
So you're seeing encouraging signs so far?
Well, I would like to be optimistic, yes.
In your mind, when you take a step back and think about what happens next, obviously it's difficult to foresee the next couple of years, but President-elect Trump has said that he will end all the conflicts happening right now in the world, and he specifically mentioned that in the Middle East and those in Europe. Do you believe that that's an achievable goal?
Well, I hope that there will be peaceful solutions to every ongoing conflict and war. However that's achieved, I believe it will serve the people of those countries that are suffering from the ongoing wars now. But I hope that these decisions are made in consultation with the parties involved, that the interests of the people are going to be taken into account. I don't know how this is going to be done. We hear that through force, peace can be promoted. Maybe that's the policy of this new administration. We have to wait and see. But in any case, we do believe that peace is going to be better than war anyway.
Are you worried about the possibility that Baghdad will be drawn into this conflict? We've already seen overt and behind the closed doors pressure coming from Israel towards Baghdad.
Of course we are worried and we are concerned about what's happening. We don't want Iraq to be dragged into this war. We don't think that this is an Iraqi war. We believe that if Iraq can play a constructive, positive role in promoting peace and bringing sides together, that's good. But to add fuel to the fire and to make things more complicated, to expand the war and conflict, it's not going to be in the best interest of the Iraqi people. And I hope that the Iraqi government will look at the interest of the Iraqi people more than the interest of anyone else.
President-elect Trump has made no secret of his support for Israel and its government, particularly its Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, a man who has just been sanctioned by the International Criminal Court. Do you believe that will be a barrier to peace?
Well, I don't know, but I believe that any step towards promoting peace must be supported, and anything that distracts peace or any initiative should be reconsidered. So I don't know exactly how this is going to play out, but I do believe that the players must come to some agreement that there must be different ways of reaching a sustainable solution to the ongoing conflicts.
Walk me through this one. There are many schools of thought on this, but to your mind, how difficult is it going to be for Iraq, for the Iraqi people, and frankly for the stability of the region if President-elect Trump decides to withdraw U.S. troops from Iraq?
Well, look, the U.S. troops were in Iraq based on the invitation from the Iraqi government, and there was a reason. There was ISIS, terrorism, that was threatening the security of the region and actually the security of the whole world. We have that first experience here in Kurdistan, and our Peshmergas were fighting ISIS, and we wanted the coalition forces, the Americans, to come to our help and assist us, and they thankfully did. There was a coalition of forces that came to support Iraq and within Iraq, Kurdistan. Now, if the overall assessment of terrorism has changed, and if Iraq believes that terrorism has come to an end, therefore we don't need American troops here, or we need to end the mission of the coalition forces. That's a different situation. And we may have different ideas, to be frank with you. We don't think that terrorism has come to an end. We think that still ISIS is intact, and they have active members. They are active in different parts of, not only in Iraq, but in the region, elsewhere in the world. And we need to have that global coalition to fight terrorism. Now, in terms of organizing or reviewing the relationship of Iraq with the coalition forces, can be different than what's been said. If the mission is no longer needed because Iraq feels it's stronger today and it can face the challenges and control the security situation in the country, that doesn't mean that the relationship between Iraq and the United States will come to an end. So ending the coalition forces or the coalition mission doesn't mean the end of U.S.-Iraqi relationship, even military relationship. So we hope that for as long as Iraq can manage its relationship with all of its partners, whether it's the United States, UK, France, Germany, Italy, any other European country, on bilateral levels, to maintain the good relations where Iraq can benefit from the friendship that is developed with all these partners, we believe that there is a way that can manage and perhaps be less risky in terms of looking at whether or not the security situation is going to be affected by the departure of the coalition forces.
Would it surprise you if U.S. troops were to stay outside of a coalition, perhaps, in some arrangement?
Whether this would surprise me? No.
No.
No. Look, U.S. is staying in many other countries in the region, not only in Iraq, but in many other Middle Eastern countries. We have U.S. forces. So it's very normal for the U.S. forces to stay in Iraq and have bilateral relations with Baghdad.
When you take a step back and look at what's happened over the last several years, the chaos that's ensued under, frankly, the leadership of the Biden administration in Washington, many people would say the catalyst for President Putin's invasion of Ukraine and what's been happening in Gaza was U.S. inaction and U.S. failure with the withdrawal from Afghanistan. In your mind, has that set a precedent for U.S. activity in the region?
Can you repeat your question?
In your mind, did the disastrous withdrawal by the Biden administration from Afghanistan set a precedent for U.S. activity in this region?
Well, I think any unilateral decision is not going to be the best decision, in my view. The U.S. was invited by the Iraqis, and any departure has to be mutually agreed. The mechanism, the timing, and the way that it needs to depart. But any unilateral decisions, while we have so many pressing issues, is going to cause new problems. And we've had this experience in 2011. In 2011, when the U.S. pulled out their forces, even then, we didn't think that was the best decision, and we anticipated that U.S. will come back, but at a higher cost, which was the case, because the vacuum left after the U.S. pulled out their troops was filled by ISIS and other terrorist organizations, and U.S. had to come back once again. So I hope that there are good decisions and well-calculated decisions. If U.S. wants to pull out, we need to look at what would be the alternative and how those vacuums created behind are going to be filled. We don't want to create another problem.
What's the best case scenario in your mind for your government from a Trump administration? What would you like to see them do?
In Kurdistan region? Well, we have very good relations with the United States. We want to continue having good relations. We want to continue having security cooperation. We want to continue and develop economic relations with the United States. The more development in the region means more stability, and more economic stability leads to more political stability and definitely to more security. So more U.S. engagement in the region, I believe, is going to help the region.
Talk to me about what's happening today with the oil law. What is the status of that legislation?
Iraq doesn't have an oil law. We have a law that belongs to the Saddam's era, which is designed for a central government. It doesn't help a federal system. We have a federal country today. We have a federal system. That centralized law is not helpful in organizing relations between Baghdad and Erbil. And unfortunately, after Baghdad decided to abolish all the previous laws, there is this law still in place, which is shocking. And we need to replace that with a new law. There was a draft back in 2007, but unfortunately was never passed through the parliament. We still believe that we need to have a modern law that is good for a federal system. And once we have that, I believe we can overcome many of the existing problems between Baghdad and Erbil.
Walk us through how much the failure to export is hurting your government. And I'm talking to the tune of $20 billion that you've lost so far.
Yes, almost every month we lose $1 billion. So it's over $20 billion that we've lost as a result of the export of
They're bleeding you dry.
To stop. Sorry?
They're bleeding you dry.
Well, unfortunately, this is hurting the rest of the country as well. But definitely, the biggest part of the country that's suffering is Kurdistan. Unfortunately, the losses that we have suffered are not being compensated. So, we see the delays in the salary payment. We see reduction in the revenues of the overall Iraqi revenues, which is not in the interest of the federal government nor in the Kurdistan region.
Yeah, Baghdad seems to characterize this shutdown of your exports as a way to assuage fears in the broader OPEC Plus group about their production concerns. And I'm talking about the fact that they want Baghdad to stick to its production numbers just like every other member of OPEC Plus is supposed to. In your mind, is that a fair assessment to put that on you?
No. Look, Iraq is producing a certain amount of oil barrels per day, and they have a quota in OPEC. But I can say that what we produce in Kurdistan is much less than what we deserve according to the percentage that Kurdistan is entitled to produce. So let's assume that Iraq is producing more than 4 million or 4.5 million barrels per day. Now the numbers have changed, though. But Kurdistan is entitled to produce at least 500,000 barrels. We are producing even less than half of that. So to tell us to reduce production, it's not fair, because the overall Iraqi production of oil needs to be reduced according to the quotas designed for Iraq. And it doesn't have to always come on at the cost of the production in Kurdistan.
How concerned are you by the fact that global oil production and global oil prices are frankly falling? Because that will impact your bottom line as well.
We are concerned, but let me tell you one thing. We in Kurdistan have realized that depending on oil as the only revenue for the country is always going to be problematic, because the price of oil is not designed by the country. There is a global market for it. So it could go up, it could go down. When price of oil is high, then Iraq can benefit, but when it's down, it's going to affect the function of the government because the budget is not going to basically, be able to support the government's, functions. In Kurdistan, we've realized that. That's why we try to diversify our economy. We try to look at different sources of revenues to invest in agriculture, invest in different industries, invest in tourism to make sure that even if oil is no longer the only revenue or, it's not generating enough revenues for us, we have different sources of revenue. Yeah. I believe that Iraq should have done that. And we look at different parts of the world, especially the oil producers. They're using the revenues generated from oil and investing in different sectors so that to secure different sources for revenues for themselves when even oil is dried out and no longer is available. Iraq is not at that stage, and that is concerning. Mm-hmm. We are concerned about that, but we strongly encourage the federal government in Baghdad, and we certainly in Kurdistan are focusing on how we should diversify our economy to at least reduce the influence of the oil price on our economy.
There's a concern that those here in your part of the world are trucking refined product to Iran. In your mind, is that a practice that should be stopped? Because that is a country, of course, that is under international sanctions.
Well, the sanctions have been imposed, and I don't think that now there is anything legally going through Iran. So it's been stopped, after the new sanctions on the productions, not only on the oil, but on the productions has been imposed. There has been a decision not to send any of those products to Iran.
So to your knowledge, that isn't happening?
Illegally, it may be happening in some places, but not under our control.
Walk me through this. You mentioned other partners and finding other partners for investment. Obviously, the conversation earlier in the day surrounded China's influence in this part of the world, the symbiosis with the United States on multiple issues and how that's evolving and may evolve under a new administration in Washington. Does the current attitude towards China coming from Washington hurt your government in terms of investment potential?
In what sense?
Well, does it keep you from partnering with countries like China that the U.S. may have a problem with from time to time?
Look, we have good relations with the United States and with all of our Western friends. But that doesn't mean that we can't have good relations with China or any other country in the world. We have a free economy, and we are inviting anyone to come and invest in our region, and we hope that our friends would compete over who can come and invest first in Kurdistan. Yeah. But if someone doesn't want to come and invest, they shouldn't be able to stop others to come and invest.
Yeah. So a trade war with China, how does that impact you?
Well, Chinese are in Iraq and also in Kurdistan. They're already investing, and we have a law of investment, and whoever is complying and accepting our regulations and is wishing to invest in Kurdistan is welcomed.
Yeah, this has been an argument, of course, that the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia and Qatar have faced as well, pressure from the United States not to partner with China on a variety of issues and technologies, for example. Do you think it's fair?
To be fair, we are not being pressured to not, have investments from the Chinese by the Americans or the Western countries.
Well, how would you characterize it? Discouraged?
Well, obviously anyone would be interested in coming and investing themselves, so we encourage them to come and invest if they want to, but no one's forced us to not have relations with China if they wish to invest in our region.
Given the current state of global affairs, do you think that this will force the United States to be more pragmatic in its approach?
Well, I think they have to be, because look, Chinese are investing in the United States. Chinese are investing in Europe. Why can't they invest in our region? I mean, that's a question, right? So whenever you answer that question, I'll answer the rest of your questions.
Talk to me a bit about your relationship today with Turkey. Is that a complex relationship?
We have good relations with Turkey. We have good economic trade and relations with Turkey. We have good understanding on the security situation in the region. And we are also encouraged by the fact that Turkey is looking at different peaceful ways to sort out the problems in the region.
Yeah.
So I would characterize our relations with Turkey as good and even better.
Yeah. And Russia?
With Russia also we have normal relations. We have Russian companies operating in Kurdistan. We have Rosneft and Gazprom Neft that are already operating in Kurdistan region and the rest of Iraq.
I want to get a sense from you of how you see the regional dynamics changing, and particularly with regards to Syria. Obviously, over the last several months, we've seen an increased number of visits between Bashar al-Assad and his partners in Saudi Arabia, his partners in UAE, things that wouldn't have happened perhaps a few years ago. And the U.S. being so tied up perhaps with other conflicts in the world and conflicts in the region, not really raising much of an eyebrow there. In your mind, are we going to see Syria reintegrated, not just regionally, but globally?
You see, when we're talking about Syria, we have to be careful about what part of Syria we're talking about. There is not one government controlling the entire territories of Syria. We have Syrian government, we have Russia, we have Iran, we have Turkey, we have the United States, we have the rest of the coalition. So we have different groups controlling different parts of the country. But if you mean the government in Damascus, we've seen that over the years, there was a maximum pressure on the government. Everybody was calling for the overthrow of the regime. And now there is, once again, reopening the channels with the government and trying to reintegrate into first to the Arab League and also to the international community. I think it depends on the cost of whatever action you take. If the decision is to overthrow the regime, you have to look at the cost of that and the meaning of what that means actually to the rest of the region and the rest of the players. And if integrating the government into the international community will bring more peace, I think that's something that I believe now many countries are looking at.
Yeah. If the Trump administration were to enact maximum pressure 2.0, for example, do you believe that would accelerate Syria's return to the international order?
I don't know about Syria, but I believe every actor has to rethink. If they want to benefit from normal relations with the United States and other players in the region, they have to perhaps revive their current policies and adopt a new policy that's acceptable, and that would go with for Syria as well, I think.
Yeah. There's a narrative in the West that Iraq is held hostage, that Baghdad is held hostage to Iran. Is that a fair assessment?
Is
that Iraq is held hostage by Iran?
Well, that's your terminology. But there is a lot of influence. Iran has a lot of influence in Iraq. That's true. Now, whether this is a decision that Iraqis have made or it's a decision that's been imposed, I think you better ask that question, ask Baghdad that question. Is this something that they are happy with or not? But we definitely know that Iran is an important neighbor for Iraq, and it's normal for Iraq to have normal relations with Iran. Now, the level of influence and the nature of relations between Baghdad and Iran, I don't control that. You have to ask them.
I'm waiting for my invitation. Walk me through this one. When you think about what happens next with regards to the internal politics, and I'm talking about the regional dynamic, we've seen enormous strides for women made in Saudi Arabia, something that those of us who cover the region never thought perhaps we would see. We've seen women, of course, taking a major role in the UAE government, for example. Half of the parliament are women. And we see strides made for women here in your government as well. But it seems as if in Baghdad, things are really rolling back. And I'm talking about the possibility that children can be married off at the age of 9, many in the international human rights community now say that this is tantamount to child rape. In your mind, is that worrying?
Yes. You know, Iraq was one of the most advanced Middle Eastern countries in terms of promoting women's rights. Unfortunately, there are factors that are affecting and influencing the rights of women in countries where poverty, injustice, illiteracy is widespread. And unfortunately, over the years, Iraq hasn't been in its best capacity. We've seen that there is a lot of illiteracy, there is a lot of women that are dropping out of college and school. Definitely this is going to affect the behavior of the society and also the women themselves, the lack of confidence, and that they don't want to participate in the community. In Kurdistan, we have, I think, in a different situation. Our culture is also different. If you look at our history, women have always had greater freedom, and they have had more rights. And over the years, we have tried to give more power to women by promoting their participation in the parliament. There are many parliamentarians that are women today, and many ministers in the cabinet that are women, and many directors and many administrators that are now women. And many women are now businesswomen, very successful businesswomen. So we're trying to give equal opportunities. I'm a little sensitive about saying women's rights because I think they have to have equal rights as men, and you need to pave the road for them.
And just to be clear, that means you would advocate for equal pay for equal work?
Yes.
Every time?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Is that something you enforce in your government?
Well, absolutely, yes.
Yeah. In your mind, what are the things that can be used in the private sector to encourage that? And I'm talking about women on boards.
Look, you need to protect everyone's rights. Let's forget women, okay? Let's talk about citizens, humans. Everyone in the country should have equal rights. There are people who are in the public sector, and there are people who are in the private sector. One of the reasons why private sector in the country has been weak, because they were afraid of retirement. In the private sector, there was no law for anyone that after a few years that they would be retired and they would have pension afterwards. Now we have passed a law in Kurdistan to secure the retirement for private sector as well. This is encouraging many people to not seek the government employment or the public sector, but to look at private sector. So if you provide more opportunities for them, if you create an environment where private sector can grow, I believe that's going to take care of many of the pressing issues that we are facing today. Not only about women, but about the whole economy.
Yeah. In your mind, what is the greatest existential threat to this region today?
Wow, this is a very tough question.
I have a reputation.
I think lack of trust. I think, history has proven that when communities don't trust each other, when systems are built on imposing ideas, when stronger players are dictating and disrespecting others, when democracy means only the rule of majority without regarding the rule of minorities, that's difficult to handle, and it's difficult to create a society where everybody would be happy. You need to feel the sense of belonging, and in order to belong to a society or to a country, you need to feel that you're equal. So the lack of equality, the lack of trust, I believe, is the source of many of the problems that we have.
How do you address that lack of trust? How do you address that lack of trust?
Reverse that. Build trust and provide, equal environments and, be just. So that's exactly what's needed.
Yeah.
And if we can build trust and provide equal opportunities to everyone, I think that will take care of it.
Do you still believe the United States is a partner to trust?
The United States? Yes, I do. Because, look, United States is not just about one person or one administration. United States is a successful country based on values of democracy and principles of equality and freedom. So, yes, U.S. wouldn't be successful if it wasn't a place that was built on the right foundations. And when you have institutions that endorse these foundations, needs to be trusted.
Your Excellency, thank you so much. Thank you.
From the White House to Gaza, Kyiv to Beijing, elections, economics and the environment compete with conflicts and other complex issues for our attention. In an age of fake news, deepfake and artificial intelligence,
They've got to have a vote and a say.
it's important to look beyond the loudest voice to understand the truth. From newsmakers to groundbreakers,
My campaign is going very well.
presidents, prime ministers, princes and peacemakers, and cultural tastemakers,